broadcasting from the Unshackled studios in Melbourne. This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net. Now here's Tim Wilms.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's WilmsFront featured interview show. It is Thursday, the 7th of July, 2022. We are live on the WilmsFront YouTube, D-Live and Odyssey channels, as well as on the interactive entropy software. You can ask either me or my guest tonight a question or send through a super chat. It is just after 8:30 p.m. here in Melbourne, Victoria, where there is a bit more sunlight during the days, but it is still freezing by Australian standards from dusk till dawn. Though we are faring much better weather-wise than the residents of northwest Sydney, who are experiencing flooding for the third time this year due to Warragamba Dam spilling again, flooding the Hawkesbury River and putting the Windsor Bridge underwater. Airbus Elbow checked back into Sydney this week to tour the floods and declare that his 43% emissions reduction target by 2030 that he'd been promoting on the global stage will help prevent local floods going forward. The new Albanese government plans to legislate their emissions target when the new parliament finally opens on July 25, seemingly undeterred from phasing out fossil fuels, despite Eastern Victoria being on the brink of power blackouts in mid-June. This led to the Australian Energy Market Operator, a federal government entity, temporarily nationalising the wholesale energy market. How did our electricity supply come this close to running out, and how did our energy supply market become so crippled? My guest tonight will explain this to us. Dr. Alan Moran is the founder and principal at Regulation Economics. Previously, he was the director of the Deregulation Institute at the Institute of Public Affairs for 18 years. He has previously been a senior official at the Australia's Productivity Commission, Director of the Commonwealth Office of Regulation Review and Deputy Secretary of Energy in the Victorian Government. He has authored and edited numerous books, Climate Change, Treaties and Policies in the Trump Era, published in 2017 by Connocourt Publishing, and Climate Change, The Facts, published in 2015 by the Institute of Public Affairs. He's a regular contributor to the Spectator magazine and online, and has written numerous op-eds for major newspapers, and has made numerous television and radio appearances as an energy policy expert. He's in demand at the moment. He does this for a living, so he's the perfect person to explain what is going on with our energy supply. Alan, welcome back to WilmsFront.
Hi, Tim. Good to talk to you again.
You were one of the first guests I had on WilmsFront when it launched in 2019, when Greta had just made her "How Dare You" speech in the United Nations. That seems like a lifetime ago. It was a pandemic ago.
Yeah, and quite a lot has happened since then, but leading up to that is the real story of why it's happened. And it's a 20-year odyssey we've come through in Australia to arrive at the situation where we have this parlous electricity supply and energy supply generally situation, which is being vividly evident right now. But the source of it, as often is the case, goes back almost 20 years or more.
Our viewers and listeners will detect an English accent, and obviously we're expecting Boris Johnson to announce his resignation at any moment. Don't worry, we're not going to cut away to listen to his resignation speech, but he too has, his climate policies have crippled his nation, and they're experiencing a cost of living crisis. such as we are here, driven in part by energy supply.
That's true, and certainly is bitten at the household level in the UK quicker than it did here. This calendar year, household electricity bills have doubled, more than doubled, in the UK. They haven't gone up that much here, but they will do this calendar year. They will double in Australia. There's no question about that. That said, I mean the issue of climate change, which has really been polarized politics here, at least since since about 2008. Is far less significant on the political horizon in the UK. There aren't pitchforks in the streets, in spite of the fact that the people have seen their electricity bills doubled. And in looking at the challenges to Boris Johnson, they're not people who've been prominent in saying, you know, we've got to get rid of Johnson because his climate policies have resulted in a doubling of the electricity price here, and we've got all sorts of problems in terms of deindustrialization. It's not, even though there are people led by the Global Warming Policy Foundation, for example, in London, who are very much concerned, as we are here in Australia, about the depredations of policy in terms of causing shortages of fuel and higher prices. These aren't the issues which seem to be turning the political debate in the UK, at least at this stage.
Yes, you're exactly right. That the climate zealots and the elites, they probably love that there's this consensus in the UK, while in Australia there has been a debate, and in the centre right parties there is alternative views to net zero and how reliable solar and wind and other non-fossil fuels can be. And it's with the election of the Albanese government, they declared that the climate wars are over again.
Well, they have, and they are over in that sense for a while, but hopefully only for a very short while, because we are seeing, and it's coincidental in a sense because it has been germinating for some time, this very rapid increase in prices, which those on the sort of green left say, well, it's all due to Ukraine or something like that. But of course that was only the catalyst for it, and certainly we saw prices double. This is on the spot market. We saw prices double in by 2018 from the levels of 2016, and we've seen them rise fivefold now, sixfold now. The price has gone from, the number is from about $40 or $50 per megawatt hour to $80, $90, $100 per megawatt hour, and currently the price is now about $250, $300 per megawatt hour. So that's the price of the generation, the electricity, the juice itself has gone up that much in the last few years. But this isn't something which is caused by international factors, or at least not in the main. It's caused by a process which started under John Howard, where for the first time, in a very small way, he introduced a subsidy for wind and solar, and that subsidy basically started undermining the neutrality of the market, and because it was a subsidy on one particular product or bunch of products and not on others, the other products then started losing their competitiveness. And gradually the subsidy was trivial at first, and by about 2012, when you probably recall, we had a carbon tax briefly and under Gillard government, which was eradicated by the incoming Abbott government in 2013, 2014. But the subsidies continued, especially under Turnbull and now under Albanese. So we're now in a situation where what was a trivial part of the electricity supply, that is the wind and solar, is now about 25 or so percent. And of course, the ALP plan is this by in 7 years' time will go to 82%. I mean, it's a colossal change. It's a unprecedented change. And with a wing and a prayer, they say this will all go well, and we'll have lower prices and the kind of regularity of supply which we've enjoyed by and large for the last 40 years. But there are many like me who would doubt that very, very strongly, and indeed, I'm pretty certain that won't happen.
Are these subsidies for renewables, are they still distributed through the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, which is another government energy entity that a lot of our viewers might not have heard of? They probably didn't hear of the Australian Energy Market Operator until about a month ago. Like, how many of these sort of organizations are there, government entities, and how do they all interact in our energy market and grid?
Well, there's about, I don't know how many there are. There must be 24 at state and federal level. And some of them are actually agencies like the ones you mentioned there, which give either soft loans or grants to particular forms of energy, which the government favors. And others basically administer regulatory arrangements which require the retailers to incorporate increasing amounts of renewable energy in the overall supply that they provide to consumers and industry. And that overall amount, that part, that renewable energy has been increasing and will continue increasing. And effectively, by requiring that, it gives a subsidy, because you can buy and sell the rights to actually put some of this renewable energy into the system, and that actually creates a kind of a subsidy. So, for example, until we saw the recent massive hikes in prices, the price of energy at the spot market was like, say, $80. But in terms of the renewable components, they had a price of $80 plus 40. So in other words, they got a 50% subsidy in terms of their contribution, and this is a result, and the actual.
This is paid for by taxpayers, isn't it?
This is paid for largely by consumers rather than taxpayers from your taxes. It's paid through your electricity bills. So this basically has been making the coal producers, which produce about 70% of our electricity, making them far less profitable, partly because they're squeezed out for increasing parts of the time, and partly because they're forced in and out, which ups their costs and causes breakdowns. So we've had that
surcharge.
It's a surcharge on your bill, but actually it's a surcharge you don't see. It's a surcharge you can estimate, but it's one that the authorities very cleverly actually don't actually advertise. So you don't actually see what
on your bill.
No, they don't. They don't put it on your bill. It is hidden. It is hidden. It's not secret, but it is hidden and is calculable, and it's not a controversial calculation. Everybody knows how much it costs. Everybody in the industry who's looking at it knows how much it costs, but most households are totally unaware. So we've had that situation which has been developing here over say 20 years or more, and finally has come to a massive head in the last 6 months. And the strange thing, Tim, is that the price has gone up from, say, $80 at the basic X generator to $300 or so in this calendar year, and actually nobody really says anymore that it's likely to go down. In the past, when those have been pushing renewable energy, and that's a mixture of ideologues and who went to school and believe we're crucifying the world, and those who are actually reaping the benefits from the subsidies. In the past, they always argued, that renewables are the cheapest form of energy, and this will be cheaper, and it won't have any impact on prices, or a very slight impact on prices, and only be a temporary impact. Not many people are saying that now. In fact, I don't think anybody's saying it now. So, there's a recognition that the renewables, if they call it the transition, the energy transition, is a transition to a much higher priced system than the one we had before. And there are various mechanisms which augment that the system to actually try to prevent, to allow it to work, because as you'd be aware, renewables don't work all the time. They're volatile, and they are weather dependent. So they basically are potentially unreliable. So you have to do put a lot of kit into the system, a lot more pipes and networks, etc., to try to make them more reliable. And there's an interesting.
We're told by the new energy and climate change minister, Chris Bowen, that we need more storage batteries for when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining. That will solve all the problems of intermittent generation, and will reduce electricity bills. That's apparently the solution, and we just need more batteries to store all this energy that's developed during the day, and it's so cheap when it's generated like that.
Well, it's actually not cheap, but and the more batteries does help, but they cost money. The batteries cost money, and what we've got in this system. We had a system, if you're talking about aggregate prices, we had a system which was sort of, if you take the production of the electricity and its transmission, it's through the main networks, not the pipes, not the local networks, but the main networks. We had a system which was valued at about $100 billion through the generators, and about $22 billion through the networks. Now, there's two options. They're not mutually exclusive, but two plans around. One was what the ALP took to the recent election. That was called rewiring the nation. And the other one has been recently. That was in, I think, December of last year. And the other one is the plan which the AEMO, which you mentioned, Australian Energy Market Operator, has recently announced, in fact, last month. And they have the same kind of objective. They're both seeking to get to 82% renewables by 2030. That's from renewables to 25%, something like that right now. So they're trying to do a massive increase in renewables, and corresponding to that, a reduction in the amount of coal generation. But the ALP plan is somewhat different. It's actually talking about they're going to get to those renewables, but they also are rewiring the nation. They say, well, rewiring the nation, we're going to give $20 billion of taxpayer money, and that's going to attract another $58 billion of private sector money. In other words, their system of the network has become $70 billion or $78 billion compared to $22 billion before. In other words, there's almost a fourfold increase in that aspect. And as well as that, you mentioned batteries. They're talking about a concrete amount of batteries. And the upshot is how much it costs. And it's not only the batteries like this, it's Snowy 2, which is being converted from the hydro system, which it was, into a system that backs up essentially renewable energy. And so that's another $60 billion as a cost. So we're talking, in the case of the AOP policy, something like $340 billion cost, which is going to replace a system which costs $120 billion. So there's got to be, it's twice or three times, almost three times the price. It certainly cannot ever be as regular and as reliable. So we're replacing that system, which we had, which was the cheapest in the world, just about, with this new system, which they tell us is going to be great, but it's going to cost at least three times as much. And there are severe questions about how reliable it can ever possibly be. So it's all being pushed, if you like, by concern about global warming, especially on the part of very energized younger people, the same people who, I guess, were supporting the Teal candidates, for example, in the last election, and by quite large licks of money from people who are producing the renewable energy and are looking to the subsidies and want more of them. So, but the end product is the price will double to the households this year and increase thereafter. And to industry, it'll be much higher because the proportion of the electricity bill that major firms comprise of major firms is much higher. The generation proportion is much higher, so their energy bills or electricity bills will go up more than households.
And that'll feed further inflation because they'll have to pass it on in the price of their products. Otherwise, they'll go out of business. And going back to what you're talking about, the rewiring the nation, Labor's policy, they did try to. They began the process when they were last in government of rewiring Australia's internet cables, and
right.
There is some similarities in how the internet market works, in there being the wholesaler and the retailer, and how the energy market works with the wholesaler and the retailer. But I'm not aware that in the internet market that there is a government body which is setting the price, and that these private companies have to apply to have the price raised. It's to free marketers such as us, that's quite insane. It's like we're seeing our grocery bills increase. It's like the major supermarkets having to apply to some grocery government board to raise the price of bread 30 cents.
Well, that's the case now. When the market broke, as you mentioned in your intro, suddenly it broke and therefore was administered, and that administration is now off. But it may well, and probably in the next few days, come back on again, because the shortages of basic feedstock for the generators, and the fact that some of them are being closed and others are actually gotten broken, means that the price, the market price has gone up, and when it goes beyond a certain level, it becomes administered by the authorities. That had never happened in the 25 years that the market has existed before May or June of this year. So it's happened for the first time now. It'll happen again many times in the future. And when you actually, it's interesting you say that the prices have gone up generally. It's not just electricity prices; they've gone up, of course. But as you say, this feeds into all goods and services that we buy, and we're seeing inflation rise largely because of this. And people don't understand why it's risen. We've got, for the first time for some years, quite a number of strikes taking place, especially in Europe, amongst in industries where there's been relatively little industrial unrest for a decade or more. And the answer to this is that suddenly people are firms are only able to pay, wage increases of say 2%, but prices have gone up at 8 or 9 or 10%, and it's because of the cost of living. Is the prices have gone up because of the energy component, not only if you're directly purchasing as a household, but in the goods and services that you buy. So people are actually, what has happened here? Why can't I? Why is my standard of living going backwards? And we have this industrial unrest as a result. And again, it's not clear to the people who are protesting the fact that their living standards have gone down why that's happened. But the answer to me, in very large part, is due to the increase in the price of energy.
I noticed that in Australia, it's only industrial action happening in New South Wales, which I conclude is because there's a coalition government there and there's a state election in 2023. There hasn't been any strikes here in Victoria because there's a Labor government in power and there's a state election in 2022. So it's so far very political here. But obviously,
I think it's more than political. It is also the fact that the Albanese government said straight away, well, the ACTU wants a 5-point-something% increase in wages. We'll agree with it. We're going to go along with that. Fine. Which is okay. So they've diffused a lot of what may have become industrial unrest by granting wage increases more or less across the board. But, that's all very well for the government to say that you now have to pay everyone a lot more money. But the people who are paying them money are confronting a market which won't agree with the price increase or won't readily agree with the price increases. So you're creating a situation where it's a stroke of a pen, you've increased wages, but you haven't increased productivity. Wages can only go up if you increase productivity, and that hasn't happened. So you basically built in a situation which is going to cause a great deal of distress amongst business people, especially small businesses, who are being forced to pay higher wages than they want to, or indeed that the market is requiring, but can't extract the higher prices, which are the corollary of this, if they're going to stay profitable and in business.
Oh, well, it's fair to assume or conclude that one of the major reasons productivity hasn't increased is because governments have shut down many industries over the past 2 years, and countries with their various restrictions, and particularly with China still pursuing zero COVID, freight has been stranded for many months, and so that has slowed innovation, and which is the main driver of increases in productivity. As obviously inflation has increased as well because the Reserve Bank has pumped way more money into our money supply. So there's all of these different factors here, and the extreme weather, which is not climate change, as what's always happened here.
Yeah, quite so. I think all of those are true. And indeed, Australia has benefited to a considerable degree by the high prices in exports. Certainly coal, thermal coal and coking coal has seen increases of 5 or 6 fold in the last year or so, partly because of shortages. We face real problems here because we've got such a strong government opposition to coal, and we've also got considerable opposition amongst green activists and amongst industry, which is responding to green activists, I guess. But none of the banks will lend to coal mine developments.
Yeah. And this is the argument that the Greens and climate activists use. Oh, it doesn't stack up in the free market. That's what they say.
But the free market has been shackled by people who are saying, as a business, you must not lend to coal mining. If you do, we're going to withdraw our savings. We're going to put pressure on you in shareholders' meetings. We're going to vilify you generally in the media, and I guess the banks and every Australian bank is the same. Just say, the cake's not worth the halfpenny, so we're not going to lend to coal sources. In addition to that, the agitators themselves make any development very, very expensive. They go and chain themselves to various heavy machinery and things like that, and they don't really get any punishment for that. And then we've to some degree stacked the courts with people who are woke judges. New South Wales is worse than most. It's run by
even
planning.
Worse than Victoria.
Well, in the terms of the courts, it is because it's run by a chap who's basically very, very much greeny and believes in global warming, and we've got to stop all coal production in Australia, even though we only produce about 3 or 4% of the world's coal. Very valuable to us, but it's still only really a trivial amount. So we have this legislative, public, agitational, and government opposition to producing the commodity, which has been the basic driver of our economic growth and indeed of the incomes that we all benefit from.
The state governments, well, we have now 6 Labor state and territory governments and 2 Liberal, but the 2 remaining Liberal governments, it's pretty much a left-wing government in New South Wales with Dominic Perrottet having as Treasurer and Energy Minister Matt Keane, also known as Matt Green. And then you have the very left-wing new Tasmanian Premier Jeremy Rockcliffe. And although the coalition at the federal level is still talking about energy security, the need for, what's the term Frydenberg always called, coal will continue to be part of the energy mix. But the states, they're able to tax fossil fuels out of existence and also ban exploration for gas.
Which they do. I mean, the exploration is banned for gas more or less throughout the eastern states, South Australia, Victoria, Tasmania, and New South Wales. Not so in Queensland. In Queensland is a major supplier of gas from that. Gas is running out elsewhere. In fact, they're even talking about no longer allowing gas for household use in Victoria. And the Victorian minister, D'Ambrosia, is saying, well, we haven't got enough gas here because we haven't. She doesn't actually say this, but we haven't got enough gas here because we've banned gas, and it's not only the Labour Party banned it, the Liberals banned it before then. We banned gas, so we're running out of it. So we'd like Queensland to divert some of the gas that was going overseas to Victoria, and no, we're not going to pay the overseas price for that gas. So, we're running into this conundrum, which is created by a government that we're short of gas. And the same issue, of course, is with power stations. A major crisis in power supply occurred in 2016 in Victoria with the closure of the Hazelwood power station. And that was under pressure as a result of the renewables having priority and being subsidized, but also it was hit by the other side because the state government suddenly trebled the what's called royalties, which is a tax on the power station, trebled it overnight and on all of the power stations, of course. And Hazelwood, said, well, that's it. We can't afford to operate now, so we're going to close. So they closed, and the price, of course, doubled, and we've gone from there. So yes, the government governments look at this as a sort of milk cow that they can just sort of tap into when they want. And the Queensland government is exactly the same and probably worse in some respects, even though they do permit gas and coal to be mined. But they put a massive new tax on coal exports, which is actually on the price when the price goes up above a certain level. But that's a breach of confidence. That's basically the coal and the gas and other financiers of these projects came in there with assurances that such a tax would not be applied, and suddenly it is. I mean, this is a sovereign risk, which is a very dangerous for Australia, which is dependent upon the government's word being more or less its bond. And suddenly, when the government changes its mind and exacts a new penalty after people have sunk capital into projects, that actually has a very chilling effect on future investment. Not only investment from overseas, but investment from within Australia.
In Victoria, the Liberal opposition is pretty much Me Too on climate policies. I mean, they're Me Too on pretty much all of Dan Andrews' agenda at the moment. But this this gas exploration ban, like, first of all, can you explain the difference in emissions between coal and gas power, and why is there this ban on gas exploration? Is it because of the that it will damage the water tables, damage prime agricultural land? What's their justification?
Well, yeah. First of all, the gas actually has got half the greenhouse gas emissions of coal in proportion to the energy it supplies. So gas is, should be the obvious one that those who are anxious about climate change and are ascribing that to coal combustion ought to be choosing. And indeed, that's what they're now. In fact, they're now doing that in Europe. They're basically giving gas a free pass. Say, well, that's okay. We'll call it greenhouse friendly, at least for the time being. So yeah, that's what gas does. But the issues about exploration and development started off with the new not new process, but a process called fracking, which is basically injecting water and some sand and some diesel and chemicals like that into rocks. Sorry, yeah, to actually force the rocks to release the gas, and then you tap the gas and you put it into the system. And that's been almost all of the gas which we've developed on the East Coast has come through that process, at least in recent years. So there was opposition to that, and the idiocy of the Liberal government, the previous Liberal national government, was that they said, okay, we're going to ban that process, even though there's 1 million of these wells being developed all around the world. They've been going since about 1946. It's been a process which has transformed the US into becoming a major exporter of energy for the first time in 50 years under the Trump regime. It's actually now an importer again because Biden has banned gas or had banned gas, and he's now trying to reopen the gas wells. So it has started that, and it was a ploy towards farmers who basically said, well, we don't get much out of this gas, and it's on our land. We don't like people coming in with heavy trucks and things, and it was the Napthine government in Victoria banned it, and they banned, and then they came in and banned all gas, not only the gas exploration through fracking, but all gas exploration onshore, which may well be lifted soon, at least for non-fracking gas. But it's basically for 10 years, any search for gas in Victoria, and other states have more or less followed suit, has been null and void. So there's been no possibility. It's been regulatory disallowed to look for gas, and gradually the existing supplies that we had are running out. And when there's a scarcity results like that, that's when the price starts shooting up. The gas price is linked to internationally, and it would have increased anyway. But you can see the difference in the United States, where gas is a quarter of the price here, because basically, notwithstanding Biden's opposition to gas, that there was an ability. Certainly the Trump governments, and even before then, there was a carte blanche given to gas exploration, and essentially they've got quite a very high supply of it and of petrol as well through the same process. So their gas prices are a quarter of those of Europe, and considerably lower than we have in Australia as well.
And the great tragedy of this self-inflicted energy crisis is that Australia is resource rich. We've got heaps of coal available to be mined, gas as well, and also uranium. We've got some of the world's largest uranium deposits. There has been, over the past decade, some more mature discussions about having nuclear power in Australia, but that upset the new energy minister, Chris Bowen, that he got so angry about it, claiming it was the most expensive form of energy, that he almost blew a microphone at his press conference. Can you see nuclear power happening? Certainly people of my generation, we're not anti-nuclear hysterics like some of the boomers were in the 60s and 70s that got it banned here.
Well, I think nuclear power is the power of the future. I mean, it's intrinsically going to be cheaper than any other power over a period of 50 years, whatever. But it certainly should have a role here. And people are talking about small modules, which Rolls-Royce is developing, and that there are other developers too, which are said to be going to be commercial in the next few years. And if that's the case, then that's great. They should be allowed in. I think under the present market settings we have for electricity, nuclear will face the same problems as coal. That is, excuse me, coal is being forced out of the market, not only because of the antipathy of government, but because it has to take second priority after renewables, which are subsidized. And uranium and nuclear would face those same difficulties. And so we would have in the short term the same problems in getting a viable new nuclear plant as we would having a viable new coal plant, while we have these subsidies which prevail still on wind and solar. So the answer is we've got to get rid of the subsidies. And it's easier said than done, but we have to stop them today, and then gradually have this cancer on the system, which is the wind and the solar, have that wind down, and then we will see new plant coming in. And whether that's coal or gas or nuclear, well, it doesn't really matter. Let the market then decide. But we can't have the system, which is so distorted now by government, pushing forward a system we would push forward an efficient supply. Until we get rid of those subsidies, we will have inefficient supply. We will have increasingly high cost supply, and increasingly irregular and unreliable supply.
And then there's also, could we have a mature discussion about where to store nuclear waste, even though they do it successfully without controversy in the Nordic nations? We'll go over to Europe, because the most immature nation when it comes to energy policy and security has been Germany. I mean, they decommissioned nuclear after the Fukushima nuclear plant mass hysteria, and there was huge Green Party victories in Germany, and now they have the Greens in coalition, and they're going to bring back coal.
I mean, they've got what they call the Jamaica coalition because it's green, black, red, and blue, like the Jamaican flag. And unfortunately, the Free Democrats, who are close to Liberal Democrats or whatever we have here, are on board with this policy, which is terribly sad. But they, yes, as you say, they haven't closed all their nuclear power stations. They've got 3 still operating, but those are due to close in November. And in spite of the fact that they've got no Russian gas and they're in a terrible situation in terms of the availability of that, and that they've closed coal power stations, which they're busily trying to reopen, at least temporarily right now, they still haven't reneged on that decision to close the 3 remaining nuclear plants. Quite a large amount of nuclear capacity there. They say it's not possible because you can't get new rods or whatever, which doesn't seem very plausible to me. But they still are planning to completely close their nuclear industry by the end of this calendar year. And the answer, yes, Germany has got a highly unreliable supply now. I mean, partly because they did depend upon Russian gas, and that dependency has stymied their ability to run an independent foreign policy and made the supply very uncertain. So they've got the highest electricity prices in the world. It's causing tremendous problems for their very technologically superior chemical and other industries, car industries, etc., all of which are facing these very high charges now. And Germany has got some real problems.
In the Netherlands currently, farmers are protesting against new nitrogen controls that the government is introducing, which could put a lot of family farming dynasties out of business. Have you been following this? What's the Dutch government's justification for this?
Well, it's all part of the global warming policy that they want to reduce the amount of emissions from the agriculture. So they're going to ban fertilizers. That's a policy which Sri Lanka put in place to considerable distress a year or so ago. So they want to ban fertilizers, and they want to change the nature of farming in a revolutionary way, which will probably be, in the case of the Netherlands, would certainly mean the destruction of about a third of the farms that are there. And even though the Netherlands is
Sri Lanka.
Sorry?
Could they go the way of Sri Lanka? The Netherlands?
I don't know that they'd go that way, because Sri Lanka had other problems as well. But certainly they'd go the way of Sri Lanka in terms of their production output. Sri Lanka's production fell by 1/3 as soon as they banned the nitrogenous fertilizers. That will certainly be the case in the Netherlands. In fact, that is the stated goal, to reduce the amount of emissions and the amount of produce by 1/3. And even though the Netherlands is a small country, it's a very productive. It's one of the biggest exporters of farm produce in the world. It's very, in terms of eggs, and very intensive farm production. So it is a major industry there, and one that the normal green left types there seem to be intent on destroying in pursuit of the wonderful carbon-free production system which they aspire to.
We're just seeing the podium being brought outside of number 10. So what is it? Boris's resignation speech, I assume, is coming shortly. The UK channels they've had, because they all have YouTube channels now, they've all had dedicated cams outside of number 10. So I've just had that on in the background there. It certainly seems like that. What is it? It was called COP26 in Glasgow. That the what is it? The globalists, what is it? Shoulder rubbing that went on there about net zero by 2050. That seems to have all disintegrated.
Yeah, and it is. In fact, one of the I mentioned earlier, one of the key aspirants for Boris Johnson's job is Javid, MP of Indian extraction, very smart guy, but he was the original promoter of net zero, and he was the Chancellor of the Exchequer at one stage in the UK before one falling out with Boris. And he was very proud of net zero as his goal, and the fact that the United Kingdom was doing more, so he said, than other countries, and basically we ought to be doing even more. So it's a real issue to me that the UK is going through these tribulations, but there doesn't seem to be that many parliamentarians saying, look, the real thing we've got to change here is we've got to actually stop excessive spending, blah, blah, blah. And we've got to stop destroying our energy industry and making it highly uncompetitive by requiring renewables. And they're on the same bandwagon as us, and may even have a larger share of renewables than we do, but certainly the same kind of policies are in place.
And you said at the beginning of the show that at the moment, the UK public is just they're not revolting against the energy policy. I mean, you and I remember we spoke at anti-carbon tax rallies in, was it 2011, when it was about to be legislated. So in Australia, there's much there's much less tolerance for rapid increases in the cost of living. I know that Australians didn't much revolt when the COVID lockdowns were happening, but that's because they were still getting money. But now the cost of living is really pinching, and you've said that to just expect it to keep on going up.
Yeah, I think there's an awareness of the importance of energy and the cost of living in Australia, which isn't in other countries. Partly because for so long we've had cheap energy, and indeed the industrial structure of Australia is geared towards cheap energy. It's not like Germany, which is highly technical, elaborately transformed, manufactures major chemicals. Ours is very much sort of geared to we've got cheap resources, we've got cheap farming resources, we've got cheap mineral resources, and we beneficate these by using cheap energy. And so it's been very much a backbone of the nation. But that said, if we look at the last election here and you sort of examine where were parties, well, we've talked about a little bit about the Teals now. So and the Teals maybe represent half of the coalition voters, maybe not, who knows, but it's plausible that they do. Certainly the National Party changed its leadership towards the Teal. It wasn't quite the case with the Liberal Party, but then again, they've not really said very much different from Labour, except Labour's going a little bit too fast in moving towards net zero. We do have a coterie of commentators, and you and I are part of that, who are much more aware of the dangers than is the case in the United Kingdom, with strong leadership, and that was certainly the case with Tony Abbott, who recognised this and acted upon it very, very, very strongly. There is a possibility of making people aware. But if we're looking for that leadership in the Liberal Party or the National Party, even, then it's pretty well absent. I can name half a dozen MPs maybe who are soldiers alongside ourselves in terms of seeking to roll back this tide of additional imposts on energy. but that's not many. And as you say, we have two states which are Liberal who are basically undistinguishable from the Labour states in that respect.
Well, your former colleague at the IPA, Tim Wilson, back then when the carbon tax was implemented, subsequently was the Liberal MP for Goldstein, 2016 to 2022, tried to sell his renewable credentials at the 2022 election, but lost his seat to the Teals. They hold 7 out of 151, which is like that's quite a significant number in the lower house, and they've got even more radical ambitions than Labor.
Yes, that's true, and I think with the Victorian election later this year, the Teals are gearing up to try and take some seats from Liberal Party people here in Victoria, and may well enjoy the same sort of success. The seats that they won were from kind of Green Left Liberal Party members, MPs, like Tim Wilson. And basically, they won those seats by putting people even more Green Left. So, in terms of public opinion, you'd have to say, regrettably, from my perspective, public opinion right now is in favour of doing more in terms of replacing our existing efficient system with another system. Now, that can change very rapidly, and we've often seen public opinion in wild swings when the implications of that become available, because at the present time it's sold as a policy that is a no-brainer. The only reason people who are opposed to having more wind and solar is that they've got vested interest in coal, and they are indifferent about raping the earth and causing all the oceans to rise and all the other mumbo jumbo that comes with the climate alarmism. So but hopefully once people see the implications of that, then there will be something of a revolt. But I've got to say that we haven't seen that really yet in Europe and in the UK, where the response to the very high prices has been so far, we're going to go even faster in replacing fossil fuels with the renewables.
And in terms of good for the natural environment, I showed the amount of space that these batteries take up, and this is a solar farm that doesn't taking up all of the natural landmass, and then the wind farms. I mean, Australia's known for its great outdoors. I mean, good luck sort of going for a hike there.
Yeah, it's looking sad. And you'd hope that there would be some pushback from environmentalists on that issue, and there is a bit, but not as much as you would think should be taking place.
Now, obviously, in winter, people are turning the heaters on. So that's why we're told there's pressure on the grid. But obviously, in summer, people turn the air conditioners on. So, what's your prediction about this summer in terms of could we see power blackouts, and which is more dangerous, that people like for people's health, if they're like too hot or too cold?
Well, I think it depends on what you mean by too. If obviously the freezing is much worse than having stifling heat, but nonetheless they're both bad. We do have a heavier load in Australia as a result of air conditioning in the summer months. To some degree, the system adjusts to that because the power stations conduct their maintenance at this time of year, actually, which is usually a relatively low load, and so we get away with having that low load. But because it's unseasonably cool throughout Eastern Australia anyway. That is increasing demand for electricity and exacerbating the problems that are caused by lack of fuel, and indeed by a couple of stations actually failing, and one blowing up, and another having a long outage when it wasn't expected. So yeah, I think both systems are bad. Certainly Europe would be much worse in the winter, and I guess a real crunch will come in Northern Europe, in particular Germany.
Or panic buying of firewood.
There may well be. Germany's hoping to get at least one terminal, and which it can import natural gas from the Middle East, operating by the end of the year. That will ease some of their problems, but it's not enough to actually ease them totally. Hence, that's why they're reopening their coal mines.
Well, thank you so much, Alan, for coming on the show tonight and explaining how Australia got to this situation, and because it is complex to understand how all of the various government interferences led us to this situation. Your website is, I've got to
regulationeconomics.com. Yeah.
Yep. And so people, you provide links to your Spectator columns and other publications as well. And that's where people can sign up for your newsletter, and you'll keep on top of, well, what's coming next when it happens.
Sure will. Thanks, Tim. You're doing great work, and good show.
As a year.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, that's the show for tonight. Boris Johnson is up on the podium now, announcing his resignation speech. So I won't keep the show going for much longer. Just tell you to tune in to Trad Tasman Talk tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Melbourne time, on the Unshackled YouTube channel, where I'll be joined by Stephen Berry. I will be discussing Jacinta's trip to Australia, hanging out with Dan Andrews and taking a few selfies, and also how Airbus Elbows check-in for a few days has gone while he's back. He's going to the Pacific Islands Forum after he's just had a stopover here, and we'll also discuss that more people can get a fourth COVID jab now to fight the upcoming Omicron subvariant wave. So as Kerry Chance said, disregard what we said about 2 jabs. It's now three or more. So I'll be discussing all that, and we'll also be discussing, since it is the mother country, the end of Boris as well. Make sure you keep checking out the unshackled.net for our production archive and articles as well. Report from Tiger Mountains and Knowledge Report with Andy Nolch. You can also support the work of the Unshackled by going to the unshackled.net/membership or the unshackled.net/donate. Thank you for your company as always. Stay safe, stay sane, stay free, stay warm, stay healthy. And yes, stay happy as well, because I know we talk a lot of doom on these shows, but I'm still an optimist. So I still choose to believe that things can get better. Good night, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to WilmsFront. Visit timwilms.com to view the archive of episodes, and keep visiting the unshackled.net to view all our shows, and to keep up with the latest real news and analysis.